So in the most unsurprising news you've ever heard, the new Miss Marvel show is getting backlash because it stars a Pakistani Muslim American and her family and people in her community. So of course the only answer for this even being a thing, or Miss Marvel even being invented as a character a couple years back, is just because of some sort of insidious woke agenda, and they just want to tick boxes and they don't want to actually cater to anyone. They're just doing it to virtue signal. We've heard all of this before, and I am going to talk about the backlash, but I also wanted to take this video and the opportunity to talk a bit more about the depiction of various Muslim groups in our Western entertainment. And I've asked people on Twitter, like, how do they feel about Muslim representation so far. And of course, I don't need to tell you that most of the time when you watch something and there are Muslim characters in it, they pretty much turn out to be insurgents. And that's been a massive, symptom of our Western culture post 2001. Muslims took over from Russians in being the bad guy in most American action films. And then I also want to talk about some more positive Muslim representation and what it actually means to people. And I kind of just want to talk about representation in general and why it actually matters, and not just Muslim Americans, for everyone, even myself. Why sometimes when you watch something you like it because it's relatable to your own culture. So before we go any further, please like the video, and in the comments, here's a fun question for people, because I know a lot of you are from all around the world, even places I never thought you guys would be watching from. So in the comments, write, what is the best depiction of your culture you've seen in video games, TV, or film? Or if there actually isn't any depiction of it, is there something that depicts something that is quite similar to your culture which you liked? Also, for every 5k we get a new chocolate orange. Help me keep building this pyramid up. That is for 75k, and hopefully we'll get another one for 80k. Also, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram. Join my subreddit, and that is in the description. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. I try and build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and the benefits of that are getting access to the private patrons Discord server and getting my Nintendo Switch friend code. Also, subscribe to my second channel, the Kavernacle Extra, for all my live stream archives, and I usually do 2 live streams a week. So before we jump into the review bombing of Miss Marvel and other things around it, I just want to talk about representation to kick this off. Now, for many of you people, when you grow up in a white Western country, especially Britain or America, you have so much of entertainment media catered specifically to you, or you can kind of see yourself in certain characters. So for example, how many video game protagonists are white men? White men with an English accent, white men with an American accent who have a very stereotypical American or British upbringing. In mainstream entertainment, there really isn't lacking straight white Americans and British as the stars of TV shows. So you have that element. Although you like seeing people who look like you, I guess for me personally, representation doesn't really mean that for me. So you guys will know if you've been subscribed for a while, but I have an Irish background, people who fought in the independence movements and stuff. And I know this sounds weird because there's so many famous Irish actors. For me personally, I don't really think there are many mainstream entertainment things that depict Irish culture in an interesting way. And I guess my culture, the culture I grew up in, is London Irish. So loads of people I grew up with are all second or third gen Irish immigrants. Most people I went to school with had some sort of immigrant background because we went to Catholic school. Of course, Catholicism is not the mainstream religion in the UK, and a significant amount of people who actually follow this religion aren't actually English. And I know this sounds kind of weird because you guys probably don't know this, but when I went to university, I was actually quite shocked at how English people were. And that sounds really weird. You guys are hearing my accent, you're like, how English people were. But when people grow up in more rural parts of England, there is this different mentality that they have, and there's a different way they talk, and there's a different way they express themselves. And it was quite jarring for me personally, growing up in a third gen migrant community. But then I do feel represented in some things, DareDevil is a good example, because here's a Catholic from an Irish background in New York, something I can kind of relate to. Even things like The Godfather, I kind of relate to, these massive scenes of baptisms and weddings. I have an absolutely huge family. My mum's one of 10. I have so many cousins. But even like Don Corleone's wife reminds me of my grandma. My grandma looks really Mediterranean despite being Irish. That's where I inherited the dark features from. But even stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like my culture. Like, I don't believe in Catholicism. I don't like Catholicism. I was kind of raised in this traditional Catholic structure, you know, baptized, confirmed, was an altar server, went to church, all those different things. And also I would say, just general representation. When I played Assassin's Creed Valhalla and they set it in Ireland, I have never played a game set in Ireland, and I love video games. So to play a game set in obviously a culture where my whole family are from and a history that obviously means something to like my family name and stuff, that was really, really cool. And I'd never had anything like this before. And to me personally, I was super excited about that. And I enjoyed that DLC so much more because it had some sort of personal connection to me. And I'm like a white, straight dude who was born in England, was raised in London, and I'm talking about how certain representation makes me feel good, right? So that's me, where I see people who look like me and sound like me all across entertainment, and I'm talking about this. So imagine if you're from a group of people who never sees yourself represented in mainstream entertainment, and how must that feel for you? And I think that's what people need to remember when we talk about things like Miss Marvel and like this focus on like a Pakistani American culture. I'm sure a lot of people can actually relate to this culture as well, but there are certain things in it which will be very familiar to the people in that culture, and they will enjoy this even more. So with that in mind, I just want to go into some of the reaction to Miss Marvel. First, I think I'll start with some positive reaction. So Malala, who obviously is Pakistani herself, wrote this little note saying, "It's not every day that I turn on the TV and find a character who eats the same foods, listens to the same music, or uses the same Urdu phrases as me. What a joy to see Miss Marvel reflect the lives of a Pakistani immigrant family and reveal a young superhero whose powers connect to her heritage. Thank you, Marvel and Disney Plus, and most importantly, Miss Marvel." So isn't that nice? And it really plays into what I was saying and how much this stuff can mean to you, especially for Muslims and people from Pakistan who are pretty much only ever depicted as insurgents. So just an IMDB review, and we're going to go back here later. As a Pakistani, I absolutely loved it. The Pakistani references were so accurate and fun, especially that Karina one. I burst out laughing at that scene. Foreign audiences also could have enjoyed it if it wasn't so childish. Some jokes are really funny while others were cringe. Now I get those people who found it childish aren't Pakistani, it's okay. This isn't for everyone. But what the hell is wrong with people who haven't watched it just because it's based on a Pakistani character? So I agree with that. So I asked my followers if any of them had thoughts about the depiction of Muslim. And we're going to go back to this tweet a bit later to talk about how they feel about the general representation. Malik saying, "I never read Miss Marvel, but my younger sister is a big fan and she loves the show. I think it quite accurately depicts the Pakistani Muslim immigrant family dynamics." Ahmed Ali saying, "I thought it was a really good depiction from Marvel, but generally Muslims have basically been portrayed as insurgents most of the time, which has basically continued to enable the stereotype. Although shows like Ramy and now Miss Marvel, I hope that begins to change." And interesting that so much of this representation does come from what happened in New York in 2001, and now two shows set in New York are looking to change, I guess, the Western views of Muslim communities. So yeah, like I was saying, representation is important, and it is nice as well just to see your own culture represented that isn't just the very stereotypical American/British culture that you get so much of. But sadly, a lot of people, unsurprisingly, like I said, didn't like this representation of a Muslim superhero or actually showing some of her culture. So Forbes reporting, Miss Marvel review bombed into being the MCU's lowest scoring show on IMDb. Miss Marvel is currently not only the best reviewed MCU series from Disney Plus, but at 97% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics. That's even above Black Panther's 96% score, meaning it's the best reviewed MCU show or movie ever at the moment. That's why it's noticeable that Miss Marvel is actually the lowest scored MCU series in IMDb, based on its user star ratings. And yes, the answer is that it's being review bombed. It's not review bombing if people just don't like it, some will say, but looking at the data, it's impossible not to see what's going on with Miss Marvel as an outlier with malicious origins. So here are the scores across all MCU Disney Plus series. Loki 8.2, and that's the highest, and then Miss Marvel is 6.6, significantly lower than the 7.2 for the second lowest, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So again, a clear downward outlier despite so much acclaim elsewhere. And digging into those numbers further, the low score is because users are spamming loads of 1-star reviews, far more than any of the other series. So here are the percent of scores which are 1-star reviews to the show. So Loki only has 1.5% 1-star reviews. Falcon and the Winter Soldier has 3%, which is the second lowest. Miss Marvel basically is all of them combined and more, has 22.2% 1-star reviews. There it is, and at the other end of the spectrum, Miss Marvel has 39% 10 out of 10 star reviews, more than any of the other series. So if you took that 1-star spam reviews away, you'd have Miss Marvel with the highest score of them all. You can see the difference via the star rating charts. Here's what's normal, somewhat meh MCU series looks like in terms of scores. So there is Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and here is Miss Marvel next to it. So you can see it's like quite polarizing, but definitely loads of people giving it 1 star. But here is just some IMDB reviews, the 1-star reviews it was talking about. So why is this necessary? The entire show from the ground up is just pandering nonsense. I love that we have heroes of different cultures, systems, and genetics in the market. My biggest beef is how Hollywood just forces it down everyone's throat in such an aggressive and eye-roll manner. Constantly calling attention to a character's belief, race, gender, whatnot just gets so belittling, not only to them, but the viewers. I do laugh at this because there are so many Marvel things to watch now. Most Marvel things don't even talk about like religion or anything, but some do. Like I said, Matt Murdock and DareDevil is a lot about Catholicism. I doubt this guy gets very mad that Matt Murdock wrestles so much with being a Catholic who is very violent. But moving on, what did I just watch? Lame and boring, not much more to add. It feels like a fan-made series rather than a real Marvel series like Loki. Also, the message is really clear here. Trash. Disney is an absolute dumpster fire right now. The problem here is a weak script, no backstory, just some obsessed kid that stumbles across some powers, the usual woke messaging thrown in, cheesy as hell, jokes are flat. The only question now is, will She-Hulk be worse? Ruined. Please don't make another series of this, and do not include this charter in phase 4 just because of diversity issues. And if you actually make a movie, choose an actor that can act. Box ticking. This is not Marvel, let me be honest. It's a box ticking exercise to keep people happy. That's all it is. Doesn't fit anywhere whatsoever. Yet again, bowing down to the minorities to keep their mouths closed in a modern day society where you have to include everyone. So that's the IMDb drama for you. And again, these guys just make me cringe in that, do you want every single thing you watch in the MCU to just be like boring like Captain America, or like just this, you know, straight white American guy or something like that, or maybe just some British guy playing some weird Asgardian god? Is that all you want? Like, is that seriously all you want? Because when something takes a look at a different culture, it makes you like really mad. And I actually appreciate this a lot because I like getting an insight into New York and immigrant communities there. Miles Morales is, of course, half Puerto Rican, and there's interesting little bits, you know, in terms of language and stuff like that. In the Sony game, I don't know why you just want everything to pander directly to you. It can be nice, but when we have it so much, surely a bit of diversity can just be nice to spice things up. The anti-SJW YouTubers, the usual suspects, made a load of videos about this. I actually found a new one, which is so much worse and more mask off than these guys. But let's start with Geeks and Gamers alum Ryan Kinnell.
Episode 1 of Miss Marvel has only been out for a day now, and already the Access media is trying to run defense for Disney and for Marvel Studios, even though it's clear that Disney didn't believe in Miss Marvel. That's why they dropped the series premiere the same night that episode 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi came out. They didn't necessarily want all of the eyes on this product, and for a good reason. It's just not very good. It's not made to appeal to a wide variety of people, to be honest with you, and that was was clear in the comic books. Miss Marvel is not a character that had widespread appeal in the comic books. Miss Marvel is a character that got low sales numbers time and time and time again. Because in the comic books, the focus for Miss Marvel, the focus for Kamala Khan is not telling a great story. It's about a self-insert character. Sana Amanat is a Pakistani-American from New Jersey, and Kamala Khan is a Pakistani-American from Jersey City. It is a self-insert into the comic books. That's why the story isn't compelling for so many people, because it's specifically designed to appeal to you if you are that gender and if you have that background. It's not about the broader story. And this TV series falls right in line with that. And now we're seeing these headlines. Miss Marvel has been review bombed on IMDB, receiving thousands of one-star ratings from users criticizing the first episode.
I do like the thought that because Miss Marvel is a Pakistani American and it's more about the culture, then that's basically the only people it's pandering to and the only people who can enjoy it. This logic is so ridiculous, and I already talked about it in this video. But then it's like, do you not like Martin Scorsese movies? Because loads of his early work is literally based on his upbringing. Like, he's an Italian American who was raised in these communities dominated by like mobsters. A lot of it is very, very personal to him. Do you say that, well, Martin Scorsese movies like Goodfellas or Mean Streets, well, they only appeal to Italian Americans from New York. They were never designed to have this wide appeal. Despite the fact that they're some of the most loved movies ever, I guess Martin Scorsese was always like, I'm just making this for Italian Americans, and you probably won't like it if you didn't have the same upbringing as me in New York. Again, totally ridiculous. Let me know in the comments, do you think people like this are just like really, really ignorant and stupid? Or are they just trying to kind of hide their bigotry against these groups by saying like, well, it's not meant to appeal to anyone? Because their argument can be deconstructed in like 2 seconds by bringing up some of the most famous films of all time. But you can even do it with Marvel. Like I said, do you have to be an Irish American Catholic who grew up in Hell's Kitchen to enjoy Daredevil? His mum is literally a nun. You don't have to grow up like him to enjoy it. So why do you have to be a Pakistani American Muslim from New Jersey to enjoy Miss Marvel? Obviously you don't. But now here is like a really mask off one. So some guy, very small YouTuber called John Del Arrows, and apparently he used to write for the Federalist. So get a load of what he thinks of Miss Marvel.
Ms. Marvel, and this just dropped, the first episode on Disney Plus. I have not watched it. I'm not going to watch it. This is Disney woke content. They're replacing all of the Avengers from their MCU universe, the white males, with diverse minority females, and that's the entire agenda at this point. If you look at Doctor Strange, the point was not Doctor Strange is a great hero. The point was America Chavez with her little trans gay flag pin the entire time is the great hero. If you look at Hawkeye, you see Hawkeye being replaced with the young woman who's just better than him at everything. If you look at Loki, he was transitioning to become a woman over the course of it. So this is what they're doing now, and Kamala Khan's just a big part of that. We used to talk about this and how Kamala Khan was just a terrible aspect of Marvel Comics. The comics were bad. They were poorly done. They were shoehorning minorities in there with just like token phrases that just like really are cringeworthy. And it appears from these stills that Disney Plus is doing the same thing. We have strange comments right here. Captain Marvel, Astaga Ifula. I don't know what that means, but okay. There you go. And here we go. And there will be a lot of haram going on in there, Kamala. This is what they're doing. They are pushing this woke content. They're pushing this multiculturalism nonsense on superheroes. And the superheroes aren't doing anything anymore other than caring about their identities. And that's heroic these days, sitting around whining about your identity. Well, I don't find anything heroic about it, and the public doesn't either. Nobody's enjoying these shows. They've universally gotten bad reviews. People have been tuning out for them, and I don't really know anybody at this juncture who's interested in Ms. Marvel or even watching it. It's been a crazy, crazy push. But this character really has had a subversive agenda from day one.
So I appreciate Anti-SJW, who just goes fully mask off, and we can just see they're a total bigot, and they literally just hate stuff because it's not white men. Because if you think that Miss Marvel is just like somehow like woke, whatever that means now, because it's diverse. I also love how he says woke after reading out a quote from the show talking about haram, because there is nothing more woke than haram and the belief in haram, something that is often used to enforce conservative Islam. Yes, very, very woke, but it's the multiculturalism that's woke. And the thing is, Miss Marvel could literally be a story about conservative Muslims in America, and they'd call it woke because it's diverse. It shows you how much their politics is just anti-diversity. It's not actually about the content or the message of these films. And we're going to talk about this a bit later, where you guys remember these guys didn't think the new Dune film was woke, but by their criteria, if they actually understood Dune, they would actually call it woke, but it shows they don't actually understand the content of Dune and how it actually is influenced a ton by Islamic history. But yeah, this guy not hiding it, but the rest of them, again, you know they have a problem with this show because it's depicting Islamic families and communities as something normal and something that is just really relatable and not something that is very hostile to America and Western values. And speaking about that, you guys will know, especially Muslim viewers of this video, that Muslims have never really been depicted in a great light in Western cinema. But it got even worse following 2001, where, like I said earlier, every Muslim character who was explicitly Muslim was a bad guy. And this is something I've wrote a big article about, you know, Edward Said and Orientalism, and how this is, you know, something that is very true of the film industry. But I tweeted out, going to talk about Miss Marvel later, but wanted to ask if I have any Muslim followers, how do you feel about Western entertainment's depiction of Muslims? And here are some of the responses I got. So Juragan saying, it's always downright insulting. I have almost never seen a proper Muslim character in Western movies, only a walking stereotype that is meant to make Muslims look otherworldly and unassimilable. I don't remember a Muslim character that wasn't depicted as an insurgent. Harun saying, extremely cringe. Westerners really have trouble thinking Muslims are fellow humans. A lot of Orientalism in effect in literally every Western media ever. People need to get that Muslims are not a monolith and someone's personality doesn't solely revolve around their religion. I'm more of a movie person than a TV person. I tend to find the Muslim community largely ignored on the big screen, except for the occasional MENA setting. One recent example I enjoyed was Dune, but it would have been nice if Stilgar or Chani were played by actors with at least Arabic roots. Also, stories specifically centered around Muslim communities are fine if done right, but I'd rather the industry focus on prominent actors and actresses like Ramy Malek playing whatever, although I do believe Ramy Malek is actually Coptic Christian rather than Muslim. So Headpack Connoisseur saying, I'm not a Muslim, but father is Shia Muslim, so awful. Iron Man, Batman vs Superman and Wonder Woman, stuff like Homeland, Messiah, weird heroic Mossad documentaries. To be honest, as a former Muslim who criticizes the way we are represented in Western media, I'm not asking for proper representation. I am asking for no representation. I do not trust any representation. And I guess that's fair because you either do get the Western representation, which often is just demonizing them, but then if you went the other way, would you want a representation that glorifies Islam? If, you know, you're an atheist or an ex-Muslim, you know, that's up for you guys to decide. But yeah, I don't think you'd get too many people who are either Muslim or raised in a Muslim community that would say that Western media has done a very good job representing Muslim communities, or actually just even depicting Muslim people as actual people and not people intent on destroying America or Britain. So I just wanted to read a bit of an interview with the star of Miss Marvel and how she thinks about the depiction of Islam and Pakistani Americans in the show. So it's 19-year-old Pakistani Canadian star Iman Bilani, and the interviewer asks, when did your personal connection with the character kick in? Immediate. The first issue I ever bought was number 19. It was called Mecca, and in it was about Eid. I was like, bro, I celebrate Eid. Every time I bought comics, I'd show my parents and they'd be like, okay, nice. But this time I was like, no, look, she's Muslim, but it's not even about her being Muslim. It's just part of her life. It's just how it was for me. My entire personality isn't Islam or being Pakistani. It's just one part of my life. And if anything, my entire life was Marvel, and that's the same for Kamala. She's a huge superhero fan, and when religion and culture and upbringing play into her story, it's almost as part of her moral code or a guiding force on the hero's journey. And I thought that was so admirable, the way she found that connection with her roots, because I felt disconnected with my roots growing up, and now I'm very proud to be Pakistani. So you mentioned an issue of Miss Marvel that included Eid celebrations. There's also an episode of the show featuring Eid. How did it feel to build these big set-piece scenes around those kind of cultural touchstones? I really felt like, wow, I know these people. When we were filming scenes like Eid or any of the family dinner scenes, I didn't even feel like I was at work. I felt like I was at one of my own family reunions, just seeing the sheer amount of brown people in the Eid scenes that many people in Salwa Hamis. It felt so crazy we were filming a Marvel show. Something I really like is that Kamala is happy, and you don't see that very often in these kinds of movies. Film and TV shape how we see people in the world, and there are 2 billion Muslims in the world, and that's 1 in 4 people. If you keep generalizing people in one-dimensional ways, that's how we're going to see them. But when you represent them in a way that reflects the way they actually live, it can open people's eyes. Oh, brown people can have fun? Crazy. Who thought that brown people aren't always so serious that they can have humor, fun, and joy? A lot of the time, people of color don't get to be real individuals, but Miss Marvel shows Kamala and her community as real people. We want to make them as specific as possible, and I think that is true representation. I think the show is going to speak for itself. I don't think I have to go out and be some sort of advocate for Muslims and Pakistanis everywhere. I can't do that. The show doesn't represent all 2 billion Muslims or South Asians. Miss Marvel isn't the end, it's just a start. I really hope that inspires more Muslim and South Asian creatives to tell their stories. I'm curious to see what this inspires. I really actually love that answer from her, and I feel like it's like a really mature answer as well, to say that I'm not trying to make this show about all Muslims. It's not meant to show all Muslim life, but we have to acknowledge that in media specifically, not only are brown people and Muslim people shown as the bad guys, they're often never given any personality at all. And I think that's true as well. Like, when I think about Muslims who are more than a one-dimensional character in media, the only things that come to my mind are some characters from Mr. Robot, like Trenton and Trenton's brother. And there's a really good episode of Mr. Robot where Elliot, played by Ramy Malek, is following around her brother, and he takes Elliot to the mosque and he makes jokes like a kid would make about what it's like to go to this religious institution. It's actually one of my favourite episodes of TV I have ever seen. But beside from shows like Mr. Robot that I've watched, you don't really see it. And that is a nice little segue into Hulu's Ramy. Now, Ramy Youssef, who plays Ramy, actually also is in Mr. Robot as well, and he kind of actually steals his scenes a lot because he is Elliot's, I guess, cubicle partner, and he just won't stop lying to Elliot about so much stuff. And I think he is a really good actor. But this show's interesting because it's about what it's like to be a Muslim in New York, like a millennial Muslim, and dealing with your religion and just millennial life and 2020s life. And although it's not absolutely massive or popular like Miss Marvel, it's not going to do the same things, but it does also treat the topic with far more nuance and shades of grey than something like Miss Marvel. So why Hulu's Ramy is so important: on April 19th, 2019, the series Ramy premiered on Hulu. Since then, it has received 2 Golden Globe nominations and 1 win, amassed large support during its 2-season run, and is considered one of Hulu's most successful comedies. Created by Ramy Youssef, who also stars in the show, the series is loosely based on his life growing up in an Arab Muslim family in New Jersey. The show follows 20-something Ramy Hassan, a first-generation Egyptian American, grappling with his identity and Muslim faith. He finds himself at a standstill in life, from his career to his education and relationships. In an effort to understand the age-old question of who I am, he turns to his culture and faith. The stark dichotomy between the standards of morality present in Arab and Muslim cultures and mainstream American millennial experience, balanced with outstanding writing, makes for great comedy. Alongside the show's ability to progress for dialogue, it gives Arab and Muslim Americans their deserved and accurate representation. When the show aired, my 30-year-old uncle told me the show was the first time he'd ever watched anything that made him feel understood. Everything that Ramy goes through resonated with my uncle's own feelings at some point in his life. As someone who shares Ramy's Arab and Muslim identity, I found myself pushing all of my friends to watch the series, hoping they would watch it and better understand me. And just before we kind of talk about all of this view of representation and how much people enjoy it goes back to the 1960s and 70s with things like Dune. So Amir Hussain, a cultural critic and professor of theological studies at Loyola Marymount University, said that as a kid growing up in the 70s, he was personally drawn to Dune's Islamic themes. You have to understand there weren't Muslim ideas and storylines on television or in movies. Then there was this book of science fiction that for myself as a Muslim minority, I was able to see my culture, Islamic culture, as one of the sources for inspiration and being represented in a positive way. Bremen referred to Atreides as the Mahdi, or expected one. Though not mentioned in the Quran, the Mahdi in Islamic tradition is a figure and a spiritual redeemer who many Muslims believe will unite the world before the return of Jesus at the end times. Atreides also takes the name Muad'Dib in the novel, nearly identical to an Arabic word for teacher, again hinting at the Sufi influence on the views of religion held by the Fremen in the book. Plot itself recalls the ideas of Islamic philosopher Ibn Khaldun, whose work stresses the cyclical nature of government in North Africa, where decadent ruling regimes were overthrown at regular intervals by tribal groups. So the same people complaining about Miss Marvel being like woke and all about ticking boxes and diversity, I doubt would ever say the same thing about Dune, despite obviously it being very, very influenced by Islamic history and culture. But with those two examples, I just hope I show people that for a lot of people, maybe people you don't know or people you haven't thought about, in Western culture, there really is not a lot of representation for Islamic migrant communities. And obviously, as someone from a migrant background myself, there is loads of representation for both Italian and Irish Americans. There always has been. Of course, it was easier for them to assimilate because they were also Christians and they were also white. And then they could actually ascend to positions of power in things like the film industry or politics. You know, Joe Biden is an Irish American, Nancy Pelosi is an Italian American, two of the most powerful people in the entire world. People like Martin Scorsese, Italian American, obviously a big influence, but you just never really had that of Muslim Americans. And you don't have that with British Muslims either, because they just do not have power in the respective film industries. And although that is changing, thanks to things like Ramy and Miss Marvel, it's something that has come, you know, a lot later, especially in the context of the UK, where especially Pakistani Muslim communities have been here for like, 70 years at this point. And of course, it has to do things with like institutional racism and poverty as a result of that racism and education and things like that. But it's good to see these things are changing. And the backlash, I think, won't last forever, because once you get more of these things, it becomes more normalized. But the first things are always going to get a massive backlash, especially when it's something like a Marvel property you're taking. And Disney Plus is an insanely popular streaming service. The MCU is literally dominating cinema and TV. So you expect when one of the shows, just one of them, starts showing a Muslim culture as opposed to a Catholic one, seen in DareDevil, you expect a backlash and you expect the types to come out of the woodwork saying, well, it's Marvel trying to tick boxes. It's Marvel just trying to pander. But apparently Ryan Kinnell says, even though it's trying to pander, it really only panders to one really specific group, therefore everyone will just hate it and can't relate to it. So overall, I think the point being is that representation is just interesting for people, so you can learn more about other cultures, other history. I certainly like to learn stuff when I watch TV or I watch cinema, and because I don't watch loads of TV and cinema, I kind of just don't watch comedies for that reason. Maybe Ramy might be a good comedy for me to watch, because I feel like when I'm watching a comedy, it's just a bit mindless and I'm not actually learning something. Whereas with a lot of film and TV, I feel like you can learn a lot about loads of different things, and that's why I gravitate to, like, non-fiction history shows, or maybe something like Mr. Robot, which deals with like politics and tech and stuff. But I'm sure there are people, and you could be like white Westerner like me, and your culture specifically probably hasn't been represented. You might be from like a really, really like small minority in your country, or something that has just never been shown on screen, and you can relate to like the Pakistani American community because you think, well, I would like that too. Wouldn't it be cool if a Marvel show actually had reference to my culture? And then you can understand why it's important to people and why it isn't just like woke pandering, and why it's important because even me, as someone from an Irish background, I have talked about how much actually seeing my history and background in a game actually made me feel, and I want everyone to kind of have that experience. But anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Follow me on social media at the Kavernacle, on Twitter, on Instagram, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.